I'd like to start by asking you the question that I've asked so many of the other members, and that is, could you describe for us what it was like for you when you first came into the House? What sort of feelings did you have? Were you awestruck? Can you describe that?
I'd been in the legislature for 18 years. I'd been 6 years as Speaker. I did not consider running for Congress, running for higher office. I considered it at best a lateral move and maybe less. But I'd been there long enough, and I'm interested in public policy. I would not trade my time in the legislature for any of the time in Washington. So it was a new adventure, but I came with those roots and that experience, and the Congress, to what degree it's different, it's bigger, it's more diverse. Our state was diverse, but the diversity of the country is larger than that of a state. New process to learn. There were things in the process that were different, and it would surprise you. And some of the culture on how things operated was different. So there were things to learn, new people to meet, and I came with a great group of people. We had 43 Democrats in that class, and unfortunately I'm the last one of that class, so our classes. We sort of think we have a reminder of Bob Matsui's widow, Doris, is a member, so technically she's a more recent member, but she is really the only sort of representative of our class that came here as Democrats in '79 left.
Now, I know that you have lamented the polarization that has arisen over the last couple of decades here in Congress between the political parties and between factions of each political party in some cases. Can you describe for us how it was different then from how it is now?
When I came, most of the members moved their families here. There was more socializing, I think, both within and across party lines, so people got to know each other better. The work week was longer, so there was more time for some of those informal meetings that could occur. Now, the last few years, it's just crammed into a couple days or a day and a half, and there isn't time for people to talk to each other. An incredible number of, particularly on the Republican side of people, I don't know who they are. I see somebody presiding, and I ask somebody next to me, "Who's that?" And they say, "I don't know," so just the whole atmosphere is more separate, and I think any time people don't know each other, there's a certain edge that develops that doesn't exist if people know each other.
But to what do you attribute the divisiveness here in Congress as you've watched it over these many years develop?
Well, part of it reflects the country, I think. The country's polarized. And I suppose to a degree you get some social issues, they up emotions maybe more than if you're fighting over a relative appropriation issue of how much or how much less on the bill. But I think it also, so it's part of the reflection of society, but it's also a reflection that people around here less. I think that less social opportunities, less, just less culture of getting together and getting to know each other.
You've talked about the fact that Congress doesn't work, as you said, doesn't work as hard.
Yeah.
I think some Republicans might argue back that it's just that they're not in Washington as long. But the argument that was made by the Republican majority when they came in was that you shouldn't spend as much time here in Washington. You should be back in your district, and you should be able to go home and live with your family in your district.
Yeah, and that may be, I expect there are several things that impact. Some of that's politics, and some of it relates to housing costs in D.C. versus other places. Probably more spouses have a well-established career and less likely to move, all of those things impact. But we're ultimately, we're elected to do a job, and that job is being in Washington and doing work here, and not simply passing an occasional law, but to be involved in significant oversight and significant committee hearing and significant amount of communication back and forth with other members. That's our job, and there's plenty of time for doing politics and still to do our job. And you know, people had competitive races before and somehow managed to win. And so I just think Congress needs to spend more time here, more time for committee work, and some time just simply for people to talk to each other. And whether that means, you know, 5 days a week or 4 days, I don't know. You know, that has, people shouldn't get dogmatic about that, but having everybody rush in Tuesday night and leave Thursday afternoon clearly doesn't work if you want Congress to be doing things.
So in other words, you think that has affected the legislating process?
Sure. There are fewer committee hearings, less oversight. I think in the recent years it's been incredible top-down run operation on lots of policy issues where what the committees do get overridden. And for a legislative body to work, you got to have good committees functioning who can spend time and develop develop legislation, and that should be the base of what we do on the floor, not something that leadership all of a sudden in their limited wisdom decides to impose on the floor.
How did you see the atmosphere here change from Democrat control? Now granted, of course, it was much nicer for you to be there when you were in the majority, and Republican control. Did that make a difference? What was the impact?
Well, I think it's fair to say that there were a group of Republicans who were very aggressive in trying to get out of the minority, and their strategy was to tear down the institution as well as deal with institution, with the substance. And in part, that drive was successful. And as a result, they developed an edge in how people treated each other that hadn't existed before.
Do you think that members coming into Congress now, the new members coming into Congress, have the same kind of reverence for the institution that you probably had when you came in 1979?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the background of all of them. I suppose the period I came, there were lots of Democrats who'd come in 74 and 76 who came with very limited experience. Our class in 78 was very different than the 74 and 76 class. Most of us came with significant experience in other elective office, and I think with significant respect for the institution of the legislative institution in this country.
You said that you think it's time for a new generation to come in. It's time for new blood here in the Congress. Do you think that members stay here too long as a rule, or not?
No, not really. And I'm not sure what context I said that. No, the turn, you know, in my class, we're all gone. And, excuse me, the turnover is pretty immense. And ultimately, this place is governed by what people decide in their own district every 2 years. We operate with term limits. There are a 2-year limit, and then people have a right to make a choice. And, you know, this year we had dramatic change for Democrats, and 94 there was dramatic change for the Republicans. Who knows what the next few years hold. But that's the ultimate right of the public. And the House is unique. All of us are up for re-election every 2 years and have to make our case.